Welcome to Thriving as a Junior Lawyer, practical advice from the experts. The American Bar Association has teamed up with Thomson Reuters Academic and Practical Law for today's webinar. With more than 400,000 members, the American Bar Association is one of the largest volunteer professional membership organizations in the world. The ABA is dedicated to providing members with resources that help them become better legal professionals and to advocating for the rule of law, both domestically and abroad. Thomson Reuters Academic's mission is simple. It empowers law schools with industry-preferred legal solutions, insightful commercial trends, and necessary education to enable our law schools to create more practice-ready law students. Practical Law provides trusted, up-to-date legal know-how across all major practice areas to help attorneys deliver accurate answers quickly and confidently. Now we'd like to introduce today's moderator, Jessica Cherry. Jessica is a senior legal editor with the Employee Benefits and Executive Compensation Service at Practical Law. Jessica, would you like to get us started?
Sure, thanks, Tracy. Before we get started, I want to thank the ABA for allowing us to bring you this webinar. We would not have been able to reach such a broad audience without the ABA's support, and based on the number of people who signed up and the huge number of questions that we received, it's clear that there is a real desire for information on this topic. So our format today is a panel discussion. I will ask several questions. Some I prepared, and others were submitted by people listening today when they registered for the webinar. We received so many questions that it would be impossible to address all of them, but we will do our best to get to as many as we can. I must extend a special thank you to our three panelists. Each of our panelists has vast experience in the legal world, both substantive expertise and experience supervising others, but their current roles are very different, and these different perspectives should enhance our discussion today. I am honored to introduce you first to Lauren Hakala. Lauren is Professional Development Director at Paul Weiss, where she oversees the development and execution of legal training and development resources for attorneys in the firm's corporate and transactional departments worldwide. Lauren previously practiced corporate and securities law at Cleary Gottlieb in New York and in London. Thank you for joining us, Lauren. Next, I'd like to introduce Rob Patrick. Rob is a partner at Hughes Hubbard and co-chair of the firm's class action and product liability and toxic torts groups. Rob is a trial lawyer with over 25 years of experience in the national and international defense of numerous mass torts. Rob also provides legal services to the music community and has a deep commitment to providing pro bono legal services. Thank you for joining us, Rob. And finally, we have George Washington, who is head of litigation for the Americas at Orange Business Services, a global provider of business-to-business communication solutions and network services. George is primarily responsible for litigation and employment law matters for the company's entities in North and South America, but he also advises senior management globally on a broad range of issues, including ethics and compliance obligations. George previously worked at Covington & Burling in Washington, D.C. So moving on to the substantive part of the presentation. My first question is an overarching one regarding professional development, and what does that mean? This is something I feel pretty strongly about, as I think many people think of it as something that only people in the early stages of their careers need to focus on. Well, I think it's something that all of us should continue to focus on throughout our careers. Also, for many people, what comes to mind are formal training programs to improve substantive legal skills. And while, of course, these skills are essential, there are other skills that are just as important to develop, and maybe more so, to advance your career. But let's see what our panelists think. Lauren, let's start with you. How would you describe professional development to a junior lawyer? What does it mean to you?
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks so much for having me. I just want to preface everything I say today with the statement that my views are my own and not those of my employer. And with that, I think I'll give sort of a conceptual answer to your question and let my fellow panelists chime in as well. But for me, professional development is really just the process of continually seeking out and engaging with new challenges and learning new skills and competencies and meeting new contacts in your professional life. And I would just say that the key word there is process, because in a healthy career path, I think that it's a path and it's something that you're going to be going throughout your career and your life, really. And as to sort of the how of meeting these challenges and acquiring new competencies, I think it is much more broader than formal training. certainly formal training is part of it, but it also involves individual reading, writing about your practice area, teaching others about your practice area. Supervising others can be a time when you meet some new challenges as a developing lawyer. Also, there's taking on new types of work for your existing clients, or advancing in your career, or taking on new positions, or making lateral moves. And the last thing I would say, that this is a process, and it's a continual process throughout your career, but it's not going to be slow and steady. So don't expect that. There's definitely going to be times when you're at a plateau and you've got your head down, and you're just sort of working along. And there's going to be times when you need to ramp up and face a lot of challenges. So that would be my answer.
Great, thanks, Lauren. The second question I will pose to Rob and George. And the question is there any advice that you wish someone had given to you when you entered the legal profession that you can offer to those starting out today? Rob, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks again for having me, and it's great to have an opportunity to talk with so many young lawyers in one shot. I think the one thing from my perspective that I wish people had told me, it's actually a couple things, but it's the importance of maintaining the friendships and contacts that you developed before you show up on day one at your law firm, having just graduated from school, or your government job, or your clerkship, or whatever it is. Our profession is changing rapidly. The change, particularly in the last 5 years, and the focus on everyone having to be a business developer if they're in a private law firm or even in a corporation in some sense, is developing clients internally, has become of paramount importance. And what tends to happen to people, at least it happened to me in my earlier career, is you get very busy as a young lawyer, and you don't have a lot of time, and you've got to allocate your time wisely to your personal life and your professional life. And often what that means sometimes when you're spending a lot of time in the office is you don't think about joining committees or organizations, or even, frankly, staying in touch with your college roommate because you're trying to make a living, and you're trying to keep your family relationships together and so forth. But I think if you want to have a long-term career as a private lawyer in a law firm, or in some place, or a consulting firm, or some place where lawyers are where they have to develop business, you've got to make time to maintain the contacts that you had when you started out, and grow additional contacts. I don't mean just to focus on what you had at age 27 or 25, but you've got to be thinking about developing your professional network and maintaining those people that are in that network from the very beginning. So that would be the first thing that may not necessarily come to mind when you're thinking about issue one that Lauren spoke about, which is professional development. Well, part of your professional development is developing your business development skills, and it's something to keep at the forefront of your mind. The second thing, echoing something that Lauren touched on, is I think and I wish someone had told me to grab a hold of my own career when I started. I was someone when I started who came into a firm, Hughes Hubbard, that had a very formal training program. We still do. It's gotten better since I was a young lawyer, but where you get a number of seminars given by senior lawyers, partners, associates in the firm, and I was satisfied with that at the time, and got my opportunities because people came to me with them. Additional training, pro bono cases, what have you, rather than seek it out on my own. And looking back with the benefit of hindsight, I think I would have developed more quickly as a lawyer and improved my skill sets if I'd grabbed a hold of my own career rather than allowed people to come to me to develop it. And there are a couple of reasons, not just things would have happened earlier, but I think perhaps I might have made partner earlier, I might have impressed clients earlier than I did, because clients and senior lawyers, they notice young lawyers who are grabbing a hold of their own careers. Lawyers who are looking for opportunities, are looking to flap their wings, and are looking to learn things. So I would advise all of you not just to be satisfied with whatever great formal training you're getting at your law firms or in your clerkships or in the corporations or government jobs you may be entering. Look for opportunities to develop yourselves. People will notice, and they'll look favorably upon that. George?
Yeah, I'm going to wind up echoing a lot of what Rob just said, but let me first start by saying that for those out there who are listening, I want everyone to know that I was not a rock star. associate. I was a very successful associate in many ways, but I was not the best associate in my class, and there are many, many things I could have done better as a junior lawyer, and I will happily share those with you, or some of those with you today. And so I just want to be sure to kind of set a bar or a baseline so folks understand that when it comes to me, at least, in my experiences and in the question of professional development, I didn't come from an associate or a junior lawyer background of being a rock star off the bat. It took some time, and mistakes were made, and lessons were learned. But that's all part of the process, and mistakes are made by everybody, and so it's something that you just got to be prepared to let happen and to learn from. But when it comes to things I wish I had been told or I knew as a junior lawyer, Rob, for me, hit the nail on the head, which is you have to be the strongest advocate for your own development, and that means, as Rob said, looking for opportunities, looking for higher levels of responsibility. It's very easy to assume that because a firm or an organization hired you and recruited you, that they'll take care of your development and your training. But the reality is that programs might be in place, but people get busy, and the programs might not match your level of interest and your level of need. And so, develop strong mentoring relationships, develop strong relationships with partners, look for assignments. Look for things that are outside of your comfort zone. When I was a third-year associate, for example, I had not taken a deposition, and there were several people in my class who had multiple depositions under their belt. And so by the time I got my deposition as a fourth or fifth year, they were even further advanced in terms of being closer to doing a trial or having other more defined skills. And so you have to put yourself in a place where you are really going to be in a position to get opportunities and to take full advantage of them. The second thing I would say is that you really need to be able to understand that what you do as a junior lawyer will brand you and create an image and a reputation about you among the folks that you work for. And that's just human nature. And so people will talk, and they'll talk about you as the person who is organized and easy to work with and on top of things. Or if you're not that, they'll talk about you as whatever you are, the person who has to be prodded, who is a little bit late with things, or who has to be pushed to deliver items or memos or whatever. And so develop good habits day in and day out, and that will translate into more assignments, into higher levels of responsibility, and will carry you forward and help you develop along the way.
Thank you, Rob and George. Great advice. Third question, we're going to go back to Lauren. The question is, many of the people listening today are in law school. Are there any particular actions you would recommend law students take while in law school to prepare them for their legal career?
Yeah, I mean, on this, I would make 2 points. One's pretty straightforward, and one's a little bit more complex. And so I'll start with the hard one. I would just say to law students that, while you're in law school, you have as much permission as you will ever have to ask people open-ended questions about their career and their career path. And I would really tell you to avail yourself of that opportunity. Talk to as many lawyers as you can to find out about their jobs, about their career paths, about their lives generally, about, maybe if their career path was a winding one, find out about that and how they got to where they are. And I think that you should treat these conversations as information gathering exercises and also relationship building exercises. I think as a young lawyer, there's a temptation to feel that when you're talking to senior people, it's because you're asking them for help. And that wouldn't be the point here. It would be really just to learn about their career path. And also to just find out about their daily lives and their practice area and how it integrates. Because one thing that I did not know as a young lawyer, and I now see quite clearly, is that the skills and the gifts that you need is very different depending on your practice area and your role. Practice areas and roles don't just differ in terms of the substantive law that you're dealing with. They really require different personality traits. They have different workflow, and they just require different gifts that are being brought to bear. So, for example, if you go into a very regulatory advisory role, you might be sitting quietly with the law and advising, whereas if you go into a transactional role, you might be negotiating contracts and sort of running deals. And those are just 2 examples from my personal area of expertise. But that's something that I didn't realize, and I think that spending time talking to lawyers in a variety of different roles and different practice areas is a way that you can start to learn that and do some introspection about how your skills might map onto one of those things. And I think that part of this can be you. If you're lucky enough to know exactly what you want to do, that's wonderful, but maybe you could have a plan B, because even if you know what you want to do, life and economic conditions can throw you curveballs, and it's good to have an idea of other areas you're interested in. And then the simple and maybe not easy, but the simple second piece of advice I would give is, while you're in law school, I would really try to take classes that relate to your career path A and plan B. I know not everyone agrees about this, but I think that the opportunity to study a substantive area of law in an academic setting is really something that's you can't replicate in practice. You're going to learn a lot more in practice, and really learning practice can only happen by doing it. But at the same time, given the complexity of legal practice areas nowadays, I would definitely, if I were doing it again, wanting to be a corporate lawyer, take classes at the business school if you can, take accounting, take corporations. Similar things could be said of litigation and other practice areas. So those are the 2 points I would highlight.
And if I can just chime in here, in terms of asking people to talk to you a little bit about their own path, their own career, this is something I used to feel very timid about. I used to think I was imposing on people's time by asking them to talk to me. And I actually, over the years, have found that people like to talk about themselves, and they're actually very flattered that you take an interest in their life and in their career.
Absolutely.
Next question is for Rob. Rob, can you share any tips for picking an area of practice?
Certainly. So I guess the biggest piece of advice I would give on this is to be true to yourself and to consider who you really are in an everyday way. And by that I mean, some people, I'm a litigator and a trial lawyer. I like getting up in front of groups of people that I don't know and making presentations. I'm not a wallflower. That's just who I am. So gravitating into litigation, where I spend most of my time trying cases or getting up in front of judges and making arguments, is something I'm very comfortable with. I'm not, shoehorning myself into a shoe that doesn't fit. And what I've seen people do sometimes in their careers is, deny who they really are. Some people just aren't comfortable doing what I do, but I'm not comfortable sitting with the tax code and trying to figure out answers to very complicated tax questions. I would be horrible at that. And so, sit back and be honest with yourself. Where am I comfortable in terms of, at least choosing corporate versus litigation, for example, and don't, jam yourself into a round hole if you're a square peg. That's just, you're avoiding some pain if you do that. The other thing I would observe is most people, and I'll place myself among them, that I'm aware of in their careers, gravitated to a practice area because they had a mentor in that practice area, or a good friend, or came to the firm and they were put on a case that they never expected to be put on. Maybe it's a patent litigation, maybe it's a product liability case, maybe it's a securities litigation, and suddenly found that it was what they always wanted to do. And so people, be open to serendipity, I guess, would be my advice on that. You will often find that when you begin working with a particular group of people or a particular partner, their passion will become your passion, and be open to that. That's not a bad thing.
Jessica, could I add to that? This is George.
Absolutely.
I think it's also important to also keep an eye out for how that practice area or practice areas that you might be interested in are developing or growing at the place where you work. Because sometimes it happens that you have a strong interest in practice area A, but the firm is not growing that practice, it's becoming smaller, or it's not going in a direction that you want it to go for your career. And so you have to look inside, as Rob said, in terms of your own interests, but you also have to evaluate on a continual basis how that practice area is existing at the place where you're working, and whether you should move on to somewhere else, or maybe step up and try to help grow the practice area, or take it in a direction that you want it to go for your career. And so it's looking in, but also looking out to see how the fit is between you and the place where you work.
Great point. I'd also add, just when when you're a summer associate, that can be a good opportunity to try on different practice areas. Even if you're assigned to one particular area, usually you'll have the opportunity to seek assignments from other partners, other departments as well. So that can be a good time to just see what other areas are all about. Okay, great. Next question is for George and then Rob. How can junior lawyers make themselves indispensable to the partners and other people that they work for?
So I think we all realize that, managers and partners every day want fewer things to worry about. And so if you have an ownership style of working and can take things off of the plate of the partner or the manager you're working for or working with, that makes their lives so much easier. And by ownership style of working, what I mean is, the facts, the strengths and weaknesses of the case, the client's preferences, the client's concerns, the client's questions, and you put yourself in a position to know what needs to be done next. Or if you don't know and the partner mentions or identifies what needs to be done next, you're the person who kind of steps up and steps forward to volunteer to handle it. That's the person that's going to be easy to work with, not going to be a burden to work with, not going to be passive on the case, and who's going to get more and more opportunities. In the relationships that I had at the law firm in my junior days, or junior stage of my career, the most successful ones were the ones where I did this. I anticipated what the partner needed. I did things that the partner didn't have to ask me to do. I just saw them, I did them, and it was a very smooth process, and I grew and I learned, and I had a very, very effective relationship with the partner. In the less successful relationships, I was more passive. I clung to my particular part of the case, whether it was researching some discrete issue or writing a memo. I didn't look for opportunities to expand and to grow my role. And that was frustrating and stressful. And so the desirable course is to really look for ways to be better used and to be used broadly on a case, because that really will serve your professional development and translate again into more opportunities on other cases with that partner, and also translate into that reputational and branding thing that I talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think that taking ownership is so important. And I'd also just like to add that when you take ownership of a project, that also means being accountable if something goes wrong. So to the extent that a mistake is made, something doesn't happen exactly as it should have happened, I think it's really important to actually stand up and address it and figure out how you can prevent that mistake from being made again, rather than just ignoring it or trying to blame somebody else on your team. That never goes over well.
Absolutely. I once did something, I filed, and again, I'm happy to share my warts. I filed a confidential document in the public record, in the court docket. And I realized it about 2 hours after I filed it, and I stressed out. But within 10 minutes of realizing it, I went to the partner, I told him what happened. He very calmly told me what to do, file a motion to strike and call opposing counsel and take care of these steps, and it all worked out. And there was no way I could have hid that. I couldn't get around the fact that I had to face up to it, and the sooner the better. So you're absolutely right about that.
It's Rob. If I could just add a few footnotes, I agree with everything that both George and Jessica said. I would also say the people that are the most valuable to me are those associates who focus on becoming great communicators. And the reason for that is our stock and trade as lawyers is providing advice and in communicating, whether it's in a memo or a conversation or an argument to the court. And the associates who work for me that are honing those skills and focused on writing and speaking clearly are the most valuable. And some associates even will go so far as to learn how to write in my style, so that when they give me a draft of something, I'll laugh and see my own turns of phrase that they've now gotten comfortable with and are aware that I normally use. So they put them in, they're able to mimic my style to make my life as easy as possible, and I very much appreciate that. Along those same lines, associates who are looking out and are being creative are the most valuable to me. And by that I mean I've had associates come to me and say, I was reading the New York Times and I see that this company is having a problem. Is that a company we should be approaching? Is there something I can do to help you on that? that is just adding value well beyond, doing a legal memo for me. That's someone who's thinking about the business of the firm, is thinking about my practice, is thinking about their potential role in it. Similar to that would be an associate who might come to me and say, I noticed there's this very interesting legal issue that's bubbling up. Is that something we should be writing an article about? Would you like me to take a crack at that? That is someone who is adding value beyond just coming in and getting an assignment and going to the library and fulfilling that assignment. And that is an associate who will be noticed.
Absolutely. This is Lauren. I loved what George said about the ownership style of working. And the way that I try to think about it is that, as someone who supervises people, is that when people are assessing your performance as a lawyer or really in any role, they're thinking, can I give this person the next level of responsibility? And so that's something that I would keep in mind as a young lawyer, and ties in with what George said.
Great. Thank you. Next question is for Rob and for George. What are the biggest mistakes that you see lawyers making at the beginning of their careers? We'll start with you, Rob.
Sure. So a big one, which people may laugh at, but many assignments these days are given via email by partners like me to incoming associates. And I can't tell you how many times I've had associates just fail to acknowledge the assignment. And coming from me, it's not quite as bad as if an email is forwarded by a client directly to that person, and the associate just begins working on it. I don't know if this is a generational thing that I'm not aware of, but an experienced lawyer will acknowledge that they've received the assignment and that they're working on it. And so it sounds like a minor thing, but it drives partners crazy. So if you get assignments by email, at least acknowledge them. Say, thanks, got it, on it, provide a status report perhaps, but don't just ignore email communications and assume that people think that you got it and you're working on it, because they don't. They get nervous that you're not on the ball. So that's a small thing, but it's something that I see repeatedly. The other thing I would mention is a failure to what I'll call stepping outside the assignment. So you get an assignment, someone asks you to research something, and the associate kind of goes off and does it, but doesn't think through, for example, have I thought of all of the policy arguments that could be presented in connection with this? Have I thought about all of the potential angles that could be used to argue this, as opposed to finding, the partner might say, I need a case that says X. You need to, of course, understand and should be asking, if appropriate, what the budget is for this, how many hours, if hours the partner expects you to spend on it, and what your role is and how it fits into what the partner or more senior associate might be doing. But, not thinking about being creative and thinking about creative angles is something that I find associates failing to do. And this kind of goes hand in hand a bit with career development and professional development. You've got to look for opportunities to show that you can shine. And being creative, rather than just turning back in the black letter law that has been requested in the assignment, stepping outside the assignment a bit and thinking about how you can be creative is critical in shining as a young lawyer.
I would say a couple of things come to mind. One is not understanding the value of mistakes. And I know I keep talking about mistakes on this call. I guess that's my theme. But mistakes are opportunities to learn and to grow and to develop. Everyone makes mistakes. It's inevitable. It's just going to happen. But the question is, what can you learn from it, and what do you do about it? I was absolutely petrified about making mistakes when I first got to the firm as a junior lawyer. I never saw myself at a firm, and I just assumed that, even the smallest mistakes might not be well received. Well, in reality, everyone who was there when I got there, had made plenty of mistakes along the way. And so you just have to understand that, you can't lose confidence when you make mistakes, and you can't be thrown off by the fact that, you either get something wrong or you miss something. Your role is to learn from that mistake and keep growing and developing. I think most partners will take the long view and will see how you do that, how you grow and develop from the mistakes, and also see whether you keep making the same kinds of mistakes over and over. So if you show development and growth from the mistakes, you're trending in the right direction. The second thing is to assume that that when you get to a firm or the place where you work, that you're supposed to be a fully formed, fully functioning, fully competent lawyer, and that you're not supposed to ask for help, you're not supposed to ask questions, and that's just wrong. My favorite thing to do on cases with partners was to ask, why are we doing this? Or why did you ask that question of that witness? Or why are we doing this strategy or making this move? Because that's how information and knowledge gets transferred from the partner to the associate, and that's how development happens in that arena. And so feel free to ask questions. Feel free to be curious about something you're working on. Feel free to be curious about things you're not working on that you hear about. You might meet a partner in the elevator or at lunch and get a chance to talk about something, and just pick their brains and ask questions and figure out why things are being done the way they are. And the final thing I would say is, and this is, I guess, specific to the firm setting, understand your role in the business of the firm. Are you doing things in a way that's helping the firm be successful? Are you billing hours on time? Are you billing quality hours? Are you submitting your hours on time? Are you communicating with the client in a way that inspires confidence and encourages the client to come back for more service? Those are things that matter. Those are intangible things and some tangible things that partners take note of. And in addition to providing good, high-quality legal service, you want to be attentive to those things as well.
That's great advice, George and Rob. I want to add one other point that I think is often overlooked, and that is the importance of asking for feedback. I think it's very important as a young lawyer to understand how you are perceived and what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you may be surprised. You may get feedback that people consider you very strong in a particular area that you never really thought of as your strong suit. I think you need to pay attention to that feedback, and especially feedback that you receive more than once. Really pay attention to that. That probably really means something. Ideally, if you're working for a partner or other senior lawyer, ideally they will take it upon themselves to give you feedback, but they may not. So you really should be proactive about asking for it and making sure that you are constantly aware of how you're being perceived and what your strengths and weaknesses are. Okay, next question is for Rob. Rob, what advice do you have for junior lawyers on how to handle projects that are beyond their experience or skill level?
My first comment on that is one would hope you won't be in that situation and that your assigners would know better. But so let's take it on. I think it's important when you're getting an assignment, and I'll use the law firm scenario because that's the one I'm most comfortable with. Sometimes, partners and more senior associates don't really focus on your seniority level. They call the traffic manager for whatever department they're in, and they ask for an associate to be assigned, and that associate shows up at their door, and they start giving the assignment. And if it's very clear to you when getting an assignment that you really have no idea what the person is talking about or are concerned that you lack the expertise or skill set necessary to handle the assignment, I think you need to be very upfront about that. It is much better to be upfront and to admit that perhaps you're not the right person and what your concerns are than to take on the assignment and fail at it because you didn't have those skill sets. There is some subtlety involved. You don't want to appear to be someone who's shirking work, of course. You just want to express that you have a concern because you haven't taken copyright or you've never worked on a patent case or whatever it is, that perhaps you're not the right person or would need some coaching in order to get through it. But if it's just an issue that you're not comfortable and that you could by getting some advice, make it through the assignment. And again, this is going to be your own judgment. You have to not be afraid to ask for help from other people in the firm. For example, in my own firm, associates that walk in the door get both an associate advisor and a partner mentor. And one of the reasons we do that is so that people will take advantage of them in situations just like this one. Where you may need the more senior associate to take a look at a memo before, maybe it's the first one you've ever written, or it's in a practice area that you're not quite that comfortable with and you're not sure whether you're handling it. But you need to take advantage of those safety nets to the extent your firm provides them. And if your firm doesn't provide them formally, it's probably likely that informally you can identify a person in the firm that might be able to give you some coaching on where you could go to start the research, et cetera, and that would be happy to do that. But I think the fundamental message is, if you honestly are being given something that you think you can't handle based on your prior experience, or you're lacking a skill that you haven't developed yet, I think you need to be explicit about that, as explicit as you can be, and seek guidance from the person that's trying to get you to do the work.
I think another helpful tip, I'm sorry, Jessica, just another helpful tip is to ask the partner, the assigning partner or manager, do you have a sample memo or brief or whatever that you prefer or that you like or that you've done before in this area? If they don't, ask other people, other associates. That was the route I took back in the day when I was a junior lawyer. I think now most firms have knowledge management systems where you might be able to, do a search for, a tag phrase and the document you're looking for to get that information. But, why recreate the wheel when the partner might have, a gold standard memo or example of what he or she is looking for? So be sure to ask if something like that has been done already that you can work from.
Great. And the other thing that I want to add is when that happens, I think it's important to ask to nonetheless be allowed to participate, even if it turns out that you may not be the front runner on a particular project, you may not be leading the charge, but to the extent that you either get coached to somebody or take second chair to somebody, and your ability to participate even on a different level may put you in a position where you can handle that matter on your own the next time. Okay, next question is for George. George, what specific skills and habits are important to develop in order to succeed in an in-house environment?
I think the main thing is to have a different mindset from working at a firm or perhaps from other organizations. In-house, your main role is to partner with your internal clients, be it HR or sales or whichever department, to find solutions that help the company be competitive or have a competitive business advantage. And by that I mean, a lot of times it's easy to say, no, you can't do this because it's too risky, or no, you can't do this because it might violate the law. When the truth is, there could be solutions that are totally feasible and effective, and that would be overlooked if you don't have the right mindset. And so the challenge for me was coming from an environment where I had a role of just delivering advice and not being a part of the solution, whereas in-house, you are at the table with the salespeople who are trying to get the deal done, or with the HR managers who are trying to figure out the employee solution or to solve the personnel problem. And sometimes there are just no good choices, and sometimes it's not black and white. And so you are a counselor, you are a partner, you are a person who is advising them on how to find the most effective compromise or the most effective solution. So that mindset is I think the most critical thing. The second thing is just being prepared to deal with the volume of work. In contrast to my days at the firm, where I had perhaps larger, more discrete matters in projects, in-house I get tons of things coming across the desk every day, big and small, and we're talking about dozens of matters that just pop up every day. And so it's a different style of work, it's a different pace of work. And getting used to that and getting used to feeling that you might not always be on top of things is always going to be a challenge, but one that you have to kind of get accustomed to dealing with.
George, just a follow-up question. Are there particular things that people who transition from a law firm to in-house find the most challenging?
Yeah, I think the work style, I think when you work at a firm, you are used to being on a team, whether it's a small team or a larger team, that's all rowing in the same direction. You've got an assignment from the client. You're all trying to work on the same problem to find a solution. Many times in-house, you've got folks rowing in different directions because one person might not want their budget impacted, or one person might not want their sales numbers hit. And so there could be different perspectives and different objectives that people have in coming to the table to solve a problem. And so your job is to, again, help be a part of that business solution to figure out how to get that problem solved. And so that can feel isolating sometimes because, at a firm, you feel this sense of camaraderie. You're all working together, whereas in-house, you're not quite sure sometimes, how legal is valued in terms of the process or the project you're working on because of these competing objectives and competing agendas.
Great. Thank you, George. Okay, next
Sure.
question is for Rob. Rob, how would you advise junior lawyers to manage expectations, both their own and those of their partners or in-house clients?
I think the critical factor in managing expectations is communication. There are fewer things more important when you're a junior lawyer than keeping the people who are supervising you, whether it's a partner, a more senior associate, or even when you're in direct contact with the client. The best way to manage their expectations is to keep them abreast of where you are with the assignments that you've given them. I should have mentioned this earlier as one of the mistakes that I've seen young associates make, and it's in failing to communicate with their supervisors about where things are. A classic example would be, you've been given an assignment, but you suddenly get a cold or you get sick and you're going to miss the deadline. And rather than letting the partner or supervising lawyer know that this has happened, just missing the deadline or calling him or her that morning and saying, I'm so sorry, I've been home sick the last 2 days. I'm not going to have that memo for you that you asked for by noon today. That's a mistake and something that will, particularly with some supervising lawyers, may cause them not to use you again because they feel they can't rely on you to meet deadlines. And so the best way to manage, the various constituencies that you'll be working for, you're going to have different assignments, usually from different partners and associates, and you've got to juggle them, is to keep them all abreast of where you are with things, and particularly to give them advance warning if you think you can't meet a deadline. You may get some pushback if you tell them you can't meet the deadline. There's probably no avoiding that, but it's much better to do that than to tell them at the last minute or tell them after you've missed the deadline, coming in with some excuse for why you did so. Open and frequent communication and giving status reports without being asked. Letting people know, okay, I'm a day into it, it looks like it's going to take me another day. Little things like that are often appreciated because it helps the supervising lawyers plan their own professional lives.
Agreed. The other point that I want to make is that sometimes, at least from my experience at law firms, sometimes the partner or senior lawyer won't tell you what the deadline is. And it should be incumbent upon you to ask, because sometimes you will think, you will have an expectation in your head that something's due the next morning, when in reality, they don't need it for another week, or vice versa. So to the extent that a deadline isn't given to you, really be proactive about making sure you understand what the expectations are of the person giving you the assignment. I would just add that. Okay, we're going to go back to Lauren. Lauren, in addition to training offered by a law firm or legal department, what kinds of things should lawyers do to advance their own careers?
This is a great question, and I'm going to echo some of the things that both Rob and George touched on earlier in the hour. And so I think I have 4 pieces of advice. And the first one is to join your local bar association. Find a committee that's doing some work that you're interested in, whether because that work relates to your main paying area of work or whether because it's a topic of general interest or that you're passionate about personally. And really just participate in what they're doing, writing comment letters to regulators from the Bar Association or providing services to the community. This is going to be a great opportunity for you to meet people, to maybe get some co-writing opportunities along with more senior members of the committee, to get some visibility, and really also just to practice being in a professional circle outside of your work environment. It can be very difficult to work this into your schedule as a busy young lawyer, but I really do feel that that is worth the time. And another thing that I would advise is to volunteer to co-write or co-present with senior people in your orbit. I know Rob said this, but volunteer to help with partners at your law firm or senior people you know from your bar association meetings with articles. Volunteer to go with them on client pitches or to prepare materials for CLEs they may be teaching outside the firm for clients or for others. Volunteer to help with internal presentations. I think that this is just a great chance to add value to a senior person as you form a mentor-mentee relationship with them. You can learn about a topic area really deeply when you're preparing an article about it in a way that you might not learn. You might learn very specific issues when working on a regular matter, but you can get a high-level view from writing about things. And as many of us in law really love writing, and so this can just be a rewarding experience all around and increase your visibility. The third thing I would say is just get in the habit of reading the publications about your practice area. Every practice area has some publications that most practitioners read, whether they're journals or blogs or magazines, newspapers. This is going to help you to learn the substance of your practice area, but also to learn the players. Who are the thought leaders in your practice area? Who are the prominent practitioners? When you run into them at a bar association, you can introduce yourself and show that you're in the know. And really just to have conversation pieces in professional situations and show that you're informed and you're one of the practitioners in this area. And my final point is just to practice your elevator speech. And by which I mean your 15-second talk about who you are and what you do. We are not trained as marketers as lawyers, but I think it's incredibly valuable to think about your pitch for who you are, because this is not only going to help you when you're meeting people at all of these professional events you're going to attend, but I think it's a really helpful mental exercise to start telling yourself who you are and what you do, and that can help you really clarify where you want to go.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Okay, next question. We're going to start with George and then go back to Lauren. What activities outside of your firm or company have you found to be helpful to your career?
This is a good one for me because I've been really involved in the labor and employment law section of the American Bar Association. I've done a bunch of speaking and writing. I've been on committees to plan conferences and programs, and I've gotten to very recently to become a member of the governing council of the section, and through that I've developed some great relationships and have really expanded my knowledge of labor and employment law, and that has really been a big benefit to me at my job. My manager appreciates it. I've gotten to really directly apply things that I've learned, and so I have no doubt that extensive involvement has really translated into practical utility and use in terms of my day-to-day job. But I've also done some things that are, less focused on my practice area. I've served on the boards of nonprofit organizations in the Washington, D.C. area, and I got to those through pro bono work that I did at the firm, and that's also been very fulfilling to help out with those organizations, but also to learn how different organizations work and to get skills looking at finances and other matters that were important to that organization. And so I encourage people to look for those kind of opportunities as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also say that in my career, definitely going to bar association meetings has been incredibly fulfilling, both for the substantive knowledge and the contacts I made, and co-writing with senior people. I just personally love to write. It's one of my passions in life. So it was an opportunity to both make contacts, show where I could shine, as I think Rob said, and really just enjoy the process. And I would also say that just viewing everyone that you meet as a professional connection throughout your career is just a great habit to get into. It can be very difficult when you're a busy young lawyer and you really have to answer to a lot of people. But I think it's just important to realize that everyone you meet, you never know where anyone's going to end up. Anyone can become a potential client. Anyone can become in a position to help you or to mentor you and teach you something. So I would really advise, that's something that I just happened to do as a junior lawyer, and it's really paid off, including, with getting positions and finding opportunities to enrich my career.
Yeah, and I'd just like to chime in here to add to that point, and also something that Rob mentioned earlier, and that is just the importance of having a life outside of work. Number one, if you don't, you will burn out. It's too hard, and it can become all-consuming if you let it. And number two, cultivating those friendships, the people that you knew in high school or in law school or someone on the other side of a transaction, those relationships are often what lead to job opportunities down the line. People that like you, people that have spent time with you will think of you when the right job comes up. So it can be very helpful for that reason as well. Next question for Lauren and George. Because of the significant demands on lawyers' time and the stress inherent in the job, many lawyers find it difficult to maintain a satisfying life outside of work. Can you share any tips for maintaining a healthy balance? Let's start with you, Lauren.
Sure. I mean, this is the million-dollar question, right? It's the tough one for each of us. But I would just highlight 3 points that have been helpful. I think the first is just to view balance and view your personal well-being as an investment in your career. I think it's tempting, particularly when you're first out of law school, to take a more is better attitude and to really just throw everything you have into your job at the expense of your own well-being. And look, that might work for some people, but for some of us, it's not going to work. And you have to remember that part of your work as a lawyer is to take care of yourself. As lawyers, we're primarily advisors, and I firmly believe that your advice will be more well taken if you appear centered, if you appear happy, and so don't feel selfish about taking care of yourself. It is part of your work, and it is an investment in your career advancement. And that sort of gets to the how. How do I do this, right? And I think one approach that might work for some people, the more type A among us, which I know I certainly fall into, it can be helpful to just schedule it. Identify the things that you need to feel centered, whether it's sleep, exercise, drinking water throughout the day, or if you have a spiritual practice that's important to you, or pleasure reading is something that really centers you. Treat it like anything else you need to do in a day, and schedule a time for it, hold yourself to it, while also being flexible, which is my third point, which is to keep in mind that balance is going to look very different at different times in your life. There will be times when you need to ramp up, invest in your career. There'll be other times when you can really afford to focus on yourself. And I think that it's important to choose those times intentionally. Think about the consequences, think about the benefits, decide what kind of a period you're in, and then give yourself permission and forgive yourself for focusing on what you're focusing on.
For me, oh, sorry. Yeah, for me, there are a couple of things. One is, it took me a long time to do this, but I figured out what's important to me in terms of what I want out of my practice and out of my life overall, in terms of how those two things mesh. And I just, like Lauren said, I began to schedule things. I began to make certain things a priority. I work from home several days a week, and with technology today, it's just really easy to get things done in different places. And that really does, I try to use that to support and facilitate the things that are important. I've got 2 lovely daughters. I don't miss any of their doctor's appointments. I schedule work around that, or I schedule appointments around work. I just make it all work out by using the resources and the systems that we all have at our fingertips now. And so it's really a matter of looking yourself in the mirror and saying, what's important to me? And you can't have it all. That's certainly true. But what's important to me, and what's the best way I can arrange my life to make this work? And so taking care of yourself and being healthy. And another thing I did at the firm was to look at partners who were successful at doing that. The partners I would like to work with the most were those who were in at, 8:30 or 8 o'clock, and who were out at 6:30. Now, I know they're working at home most likely, but they had very stable days. They had very predictable days. And I would often interview them kind of casually about how they get this stuff done so efficiently, and how they make this work, this work for them. They had interests outside of the firm, and so they shared their tips and their strategies. And it's going to differ from person to person, but I did pick up nuggets along the way for how one can have a demanding job, a satisfying job, and still have balance and interests outside of the workplace. And so don't feel like you've got to solve the riddle yourself. Definitely ask other people what works for them, and to figure out what you can glean from their experiences.
Great advice. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I'm going to start with Lauren, but Rob and George, feel free to chime in. The first question is, what is the smartest career decision you have made? This came from someone who registered and is on the phone today.
That's a great question. And I, as folks can see from looking at my resume, I've taken an unconventional career path for an attorney. And, I started at a large law firm. I then went to work at a small legal know-how startup, which has now grown into a huge and successful company. And now I'm working at a law firm in a staff role supporting the attorneys there. And I think, the best decision I made was really to follow my passion and take advantage of opportunities as they came, and to view my career really as a marathon, and sort of take opportunities as they came, while also thinking them through.
And another question that came in from somebody on that's listening today: are there any courses that you did not take in law school that in hindsight you wish you had taken?
Oh, is that to me? Well, yes, there are. As a business lawyer, as a corporate lawyer, I do wish I did, at my law school, we did have many opportunities to take classes on securities regulation, corporations, accounting for lawyers. But if I had it to do over, knowing where my career has gone, I would have taken more classes around that, and maybe thought to take classes at the business school, because you can't underestimate the value of corporate finance training in the business law world. It's a challenge, and it's one that you can address by formal study, I think.
Actually, it's Rob. I want to underscore that last statement. It is the one thing I regret is not taking some courses at the business school, corporate finance in particular, but also all manner of things corporation related. I'm a trial lawyer, a litigator, but understanding your client's business is critical to being able to look around the corner for them and anticipate issues that are coming down the road. And having a fundamental understanding of how corporations work, how they're financed, what their issues are generally, is critical to being valuable as a lawyer.
Great.
I completely agree. Very important.
Okay, so we are just about out of time. I would like to thank our panelists for taking the time to thoughtfully answer our questions, and everyone who is listening, I thank you for joining us today. Those of you who submitted questions that were not answered, you will receive follow-up correspondence from Thomson Reuters Academic. Tracy, let me throw it back to you.
Great. This concludes the program. We'd like to thank you for attending. We'd also like to thank our panelists, Thomson Reuters Academic and Practical Law. Take care and have a great day.